The most humiliating moment of my life happened on a Sunday evening in a dining room that smelled like roast chicken and furniture polish, and the specific warmth of a house that has been lived in for 30 years by the same family. 14 people around the table, good wine, good food, the kind of evening that looks, from the outside, like exactly what a family is supposed to look like. And my mother-in-law, Patricia, stood up to give what everyone assumed was going to be a toast to her son. It was not a toast. She looked around that table slowly, the way people do when they want to make sure they have the room before they say something they have been waiting a long time to say. She looked at her daughter Vanessa, at the aunts and uncles who had driven 2 hours to be there, at the cousins who were on their second glass of wine and were already laughing at something, and then she looked at me, and she smiled. That smile. I have thought about that smile so many times since that evening. It was the smile of a woman who was completely certain, who had decided something a long time ago, and had spent a long time waiting for the right moment and the right audience, and had decided that this was finally both. She said, "I just want to say something, because I think it needs to be said by someone who loves this family enough to be honest about what they see." My husband James put his fork down. I picked up my wine glass. She said, "Nadia is a smart woman. Nobody can deny that. She knows what she wants, and she goes after it. And what she wanted," she looked directly at James, "was security, someone established, a family with something behind it. And I think it is time we all just acknowledged what we are actually looking at here, instead of pretending we cannot see it." The table went quiet in that specific way that only happens when something has been said that cannot be unsaid. My name is Nadia Reeves. I am 34 years old. I am a corporate finance director, and I have spent the last 11 years managing investment portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars for companies across 3 different countries. I have sat across tables from some of the most aggressive people in the financial industry, and I have never once lost my position or my composure. I sat at that dinner table while my mother-in-law called me a gold digger in front of her entire family. And I said absolutely nothing. Not because I had nothing to say. Not because I was hurt into silence. Because 4 days before that dinner, I had made the final payment on her mortgage. The entire remaining balance. Cleared. In full. With my name on every single transaction. And I had decided, a very long time before that moment, that the truth was going to arrive on its own schedule, in its own way, through a bank letter, and not through anything I said at a dinner table. Because anything I said at a dinner table was going to look like defense. And I was not defending anything. I was waiting. If you are new here, please subscribe and hit the like button right now. And please stay until the end of this story, because what happens next, and what I found out about my own family in the weeks after that dinner, is something that is going to stay with you. Every single part of this matters. Do not go anywhere. Let me take you back to the beginning, because that dining room did not come from nowhere. It came from 2 years of something building quietly and carefully. And I want you to understand all of it before we get to the letter. I met James 3.5 years before that dinner, work event. The kind of corporate evening where everyone stands around holding drinks they are not really tasting and talking about things they are not really interested in. He was presenting something about sustainable infrastructure investment. I was in the audience being professionally skeptical, because being professionally skeptical is essentially my personality at this point. And I cannot turn it off even at evening events with bad canapes. He said something during the question portion that was so specifically wrong that I put my hand up and told him exactly why. He was not offended. He was interested. He asked for my number when the evening ended. I gave it to him because anyone who responds to being publicly corrected with curiosity rather than defensiveness is someone worth knowing. We dated for 14 months before I met his family. I want to be clear about that because some people hear 14 months and think there was something being hidden. There was not. It was a deliberate choice on my part, and James understood it and respected it. I have a rule about meeting families. The rule is that I need to know a person properly before I sit across from the people who made them. Because families tell you things that years of dating cannot. The way someone behaves around their parents, their siblings, the people who knew them before they knew you, that is where the real information lives. So I waited until I was ready, and when I finally met Patricia, I understood several things within approximately 40 minutes. She was sharp, much sharper than she presented. She had the specific intelligence of a woman who had spent decades being slightly underestimated, and had learned to use that underestimation as a kind of camouflage. She asked questions that sounded like small talk, and were not. She watched reactions more than she watched faces. She had a way of directing a room without appearing to direct it at all. I recognized all of this, because I do some version of it myself. What I also understood within that first meeting was that she had a very specific picture in her head of who James was supposed to be with, and that picture did not look anything like me. Not because of anything she said directly. Patricia never said anything directly. It was in the quality of attention she gave me, a particular kind of watching. The watching of a woman who had already decided what she was looking for, and was checking whether the evidence supported her conclusion. I did not fit her conclusion. I was too certain, too comfortable with silence, too unbothered by the specific social tests that Patricia ran without appearing to run them. The way she mentioned expensive things casually to see how I responded. The way she asked about my background with a warmth that was genuine on the surface and was something else just underneath it. I responded to all of it with exactly the same quality of calm. I think that bothered her more than anything else. Because the performance she was watching for, the performance of a woman who had positioned herself strategically and was working to maintain that position, was not there. And when the thing you are looking for is not there, the options are to conclude it does not exist, or to conclude it is being very well hidden. Patricia chose the second conclusion, and that choice, once made, became the lens through which she looked at everything I did for the next 2 years. I was warm to her. That was strategic. I remembered details about her life. That was calculated. I got along well with Vanessa. That was an investment. I was good at my job. That was because I had attached myself to the right people. Everything I did became evidence of something she had already decided. And she shared that evidence. Quietly. Carefully. In the way that intelligent people share things they are not quite sure they should be sharing. Framed as concern. Framed as love for her son. Framed as the natural worry of a mother who wanted to make sure her child was genuinely happy. I know because Vanessa told me. Not all of it. Vanessa is not a person who betrays her mother completely. But enough. A comment here. A thing that slipped out and was immediately partially retracted. Enough for me to understand the shape of what was happening, even when I could not see the specific details. I filed it away. I did not bring it to James. Not because I was protecting him from it, but because I had decided that anything I said about his mother was going to land in a complicated place, and was going to require him to choose sides in a way that was not fair to him at this stage of things. I needed more. I needed time. I needed to understand the full picture before I did anything with what I was beginning to see. So I watched. And I waited. And I kept showing up to Sunday dinners and family gatherings and birthday celebrations with the same quality of warmth and the same quality of calm. And I let Patricia build her theory, and I said nothing to anyone. Looking back now, I wonder sometimes whether saying something earlier would have changed anything. Whether a direct conversation with Patricia in the first year could have shifted something before it calcified. Whether the particular stubbornness of a conclusion that has been held for a long time and shared with other people is something that can be addressed with honesty, or whether it has to be addressed with evidence. I think I already knew the answer to that question. I think that is why I stayed quiet. Because Patricia did not need honesty. She needed evidence that could not be argued with. The kind that arrives in the mail with a bank's letterhead on it and does not require my presence or my words or my defense of myself to mean exactly what it means. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before the letter, there was the mortgage. And before the mortgage, there was a conversation with James on a Tuesday evening in November that changed the direction of everything that followed. It started with a spreadsheet. James and I had been married for 8 months, and we were doing the kind of joint financial planning that newly married people who are serious about their future do, going through accounts, consolidating things that made sense to consolidate, building a clear picture of where we were and where we wanted to be. I am a corporate finance director. Spreadsheets are how I understand the world. James knows this about me and finds it somewhere between endearing and slightly alarming depending on the day. We were going through his personal account history when I noticed something. Regular payments. Same account. Every month. Sometimes twice a month. Amounts that varied, but that were consistently in the £200 to £300 range. I said, "What is this account?" He said, "Oh, that is my mom's mortgage." I said, "You are paying her mortgage?" He said, "Not paying it, just topping it up when she is short. It is not a huge amount." I looked at the history going back 2 years. It was a significant amount. I did the math in my head, because I always do the math in my head, and across 24 months it was just under £40,000. I put my pen down. I said, "James, does she know you are doing this?" He said, "She knows I help. She does not ask about the specifics." I said, "And how much does she still owe on the house?" He thought about it. Yakhla said he thought around 80,000. Up and on, maybe a little less. He was not exactly sure. I sat with that for a moment. £80,000. A woman living alone in a house she had owned for 30 years. A retired teacher's pension that covered her basic costs, but not the mortgage that had been refinanced twice during her marriage to cover other things. A son who had been quietly supplementing her payments for 2 years out of his own personal account without telling his wife. I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He said, "It did not feel like my place to involve you in something to do with my mother's finances. I have always just handled it." I said, "We are married, James. Your finances are our finances." He said, "I know. I should have said something. He stopped. I did not know how to have that conversation. I understood what he meant. Having that conversation meant acknowledging that his mother was struggling in a way that she was working very hard not to appear to be struggling. And having it with me specifically meant involving the woman his mother had already decided was a strategic operator in the personal details of her financial life. He had been trying to protect both of them simultaneously and had ended up not fully protecting either. I did not say any of that. I said, "Okay, let me think about this." He said, "What do you mean?" "Think about it. There is nothing to think about. I will keep handling it." I said, "I know you will. I just want to think." He let it go. And for the next 3 weeks, I thought. Not about whether to help. I knew within about 4 days that I was going to pay off the mortgage. The decision itself was not complicated. What I was thinking about was the how. Specifically, whether to do it openly or quietly. Whether to tell James before or after. Whether to tell Patricia at all, or let the bank do that for me. Because here is the thing about doing something significant for someone who does not like you. If you tell them you are doing it before you do it, it looks like a demonstration. A power move. A way of saying, "Look what I can do, and you were wrong about me." If you tell them after, it looks calculated, like you planned the reveal. But if the bank tells them, if a letter arrives with no warning, no drama, no version of events that I have shaped or presented, then the truth just arrives as itself, clean, inarguable, not attached to anything I said or any way I chose to frame it. I decided the bank would tell her. I made the arrangements through my personal account. I called the mortgage provider and explained that I wanted to clear the remaining balance on behalf of the account holder. They confirmed the process and the amount. It was £78,000, slightly less than James had estimated. I set up the payment in 3 installments across 2 months, so it would not look like a single dramatic gesture, but like something steady and deliberate. I told James 2 weeks after the final payment cleared, not because I was hiding it from him, because I wanted to make sure it was done and irreversible before I brought it into a conversation where it would inevitably become complicated. His face when I told him was something I have thought about many times since. He sat very still for a long time. Then he said, "When?" I said, "The final payment cleared about 2 weeks ago." He said, "Nadia, why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because I wanted it to be done before it became a discussion. And because I did not want it to be a gesture. I wanted it to just be a thing that happened." He said, "My mother does not know." I said, "No, the bank will write to her. Standard confirmation letter. It should arrive within the next couple of weeks." He was quiet again. Then he said, "She is going to..." He stopped. He did not finish the sentence. I said, "I know." He said, "You know what she thinks of you." I said, "Yes." He said, "And you did this anyway." I said, "She was struggling, James. Regardless of what she thinks of me, she was struggling. And you have been carrying that quietly for 2 years. I did not want you to keep carrying it." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I do not always know what to do with you." I said, "That is fine. You do not have to know. You just have to trust me." He said, "I do." 14 days after that conversation, Patricia stood up at her son's birthday dinner and called me a gold digger in front of 14 people. I had known the letter had not arrived yet. I had checked. I picked up my wine glass, and I let her finish. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 11 days after the dinner. I know the exact day because James called me at 11:30 in the morning when I was in the middle of a quarterly review meeting, and I saw his name on my phone and stepped out because James does not call during working hours unless something has happened. He said, "The letter came." I said, "Okay." He said, "She called me. She has been crying for about an hour." I said, "Okay." He said, "Nadia." She did not know what to say. She kept saying your name and then stopping. I said, "How are you doing with all of this?" He said, "Honestly, I do not know. I feel about 12 different things at once." I said, "That makes sense." He said, "She wants to call you." I said, "She can call me whenever she is ready." He said, "Are you ready for that call?" I said, "James, I have been ready for that call for a long time." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I love you." I said, "I know. I love you too. Go call your mother back. She needs you right now more than I do." I went back into my meeting. I sat at that conference table looking at quarterly figures, and I felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for a long time. Not satisfaction exactly. Something quieter than satisfaction. Something that felt like the specific relief of a truth that has been waiting in the right place, finally arriving at the right moment without any help from you. Patricia called me the next morning, 9:47 a.m. I was at my desk. I had my coffee. I had known the call was coming, and I had thought about what I was going to say, and I had decided I was going to say very little and listen a great deal. She said my name first. Just Nadia. The way she said it was different from every other time she had said it. Every other time there had been a quality to it. A specific, careful quality. Like she was handling something she was not entirely sure about. This time, it was just my name. Plain. No quality to it, except something that might have been exhaustion. I said, "Patricia, hello." She said, "I got a letter from the bank." I said, "Yes." She said, "It says the mortgage balance has been cleared." I said, "Yes." She said, "It has your name on it. The payment account. It has your name." I said, "Yes." She said, "I do not." She stopped, started again. "I do not understand." I said, "What do you not understand?" She said, "Why would you?" After everything I have, she could not finish any of the sentences. They all had the same problem. They all contained the thing she had done and the thing I had done in the same sentence, and she could not make the two things sit together in a way that made any sense to her. I said, "Patricia, can I say something?" She said yes. I said, "I did not pay off your mortgage to prove a point. I did not do it to create this moment or to make you feel a particular way. I did it because you were struggling with something you should not have had to struggle with alone. And because your son has been quietly helping you with it for 2 years out of his own pocket, and I did not think he should have to keep doing that. That is the reason. It is not more complicated than that." She said, "But I said, at dinner, I said, I know what you said." She said in front of everyone. I said, "Yes." The line was very quiet. Then she said, "I have been saying things, not just at dinner, for a long time, to Vanessa, to the family, things that She stopped. I thought I was right. I was so certain I was right. I said, "I know you were certain." She said, "How did you..." She stopped again. "How did you do this, knowing what I thought, knowing what I was saying?" I said, "Because what you thought about me had nothing to do with whether the right thing was the right thing." She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I owe you an apology, not just for the dinner, for 2 years of an apology." I said, "I know." She said, "I do not know how to make that right." I said, "You start by being honest with the people you said those things to. That is where you start, not with me, with them." She said, "And with you?" I said, "With me, you just start. We do not have to call it anything yet. We just start." She said, "Okay." I said, "Okay." That was the conversation. It lasted 9 minutes. It was the most honest 9 minutes Patricia and I had ever shared. And it was not dramatic, and it did not resolve everything. And it was not the ending of anything, really. It was more like a door that had been closed for 2 years, being opened just enough to feel the air. 8 months have passed since that phone call. I want to tell you where things are because I think you deserve the honest version and not the tidy one. And the honest version is complicated in the specific way that real things always are. Patricia and I are different now. Not fixed. Not transformed. Not the kind of relationship that gets described in warm terms at family dinners. Just different. The particular quality of watching that she used to direct at me is gone, replaced by something more uncertain, more genuine. The watching of a woman who has understood that she built an entire picture of a person from assumptions, and that the picture was wrong, and who is now, slowly and sometimes clumsily, trying to look directly instead of through a lens she constructed herself. That is not nothing. That is actually quite a lot. She came to our house for dinner 3 weeks after the phone call. Just the 3 of us. She brought flowers. Not an extravagant thing. Just flowers from a shop on the way. The kind that say I wanted to bring something and I was not sure what. She sat at our kitchen table and she was quieter than usual. And the quietness had a different quality from the careful, calculated quietness she had operated in before. This was the quietness of a person who is genuinely not sure what to say and has decided that not saying the wrong thing is more important than filling the silence. We ate dinner. We talked about normal things. At the end of the evening, when she was putting on her coat in the hallway, she said, "I told Vanessa everything, and the aunts. I told them I had been wrong about you and that what I said at the dinner was not right, and that I owe you more than an apology, but that I am going to start with one." I said, "Thank you for doing that." She said, "Some of them already knew something was off." Vanessa said she had never believed it. The aunts were more complicated. I said, "That is okay." She said, "Is it?" I said, "It is going to have to be. I cannot control what people believed. I can only know what the truth is." She nodded. She said, "You are not what I thought you were." I said, "I know." She said, "I am glad to find that out, even if the way I found it out was," she paused, "was not something I am proud of." I said, Nobody needs to be proud of everything they have ever done. They just need to be honest about it. She left. James closed the door and leaned against it and looked at me for a long moment. He said, "How are you doing?" "Actually." I said, "Actually? I feel like I have been carrying something heavy for a long time, and I put it down recently, and my arms still remember the weight of it. But my hands are empty now, and I am not entirely sure what to do with empty hands." He said, "That is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about anything." I laughed. He came and put his arms around me in the hallway, and we stood there for a while, and the house was quiet, and the dinner dishes were still on the table, and somewhere outside a car was going past, and it was the most ordinary moment, and also somehow the most significant one. Vanessa called me the following week. She said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it properly." I said, "Okay." She said, "I never believed it. What Mom was saying. Not from the beginning. I saw the way you were with James, and I saw the way you showed up for this family, and I never once thought it was calculated. But I did not say that out loud to anyone who needed to hear it, and I should have. I should have said it to Mom years ago, and I should have said it to you. And I did not do either of those things, and I am sorry." I said, "Why didn't you?" She said, "Because saying it to Mom would have been a fight, and I did not want to fight, and saying it to you felt like betraying Mom, even when I thought she was wrong." I said, "I understand that." She said, "It is not a good enough reason, though." I said, "No, it is not, but it is a human one." She said, "Are we okay?" I said, "Yes, we are getting there. The family knows now. Not every detail, not the full 2 years of what Patricia was saying and who she was saying it to, but enough. Patricia told them herself, in her own way, and in her own time, and I respected that she did it at all, because she did not have to, and doing it was not easy, and the fact that she chose to do it anyway tells me something about who she actually is, underneath the certainty she had wrapped herself in for so long. Some people called me after they found out, some did not. I am not keeping count. Here is the thing I want to say about why I paid off that mortgage. It was not strategic. I know it looks strategic. I know that from the outside, the whole thing has the shape of a move. The quiet payment, the timing, the letting the letter do the work. And I understand why people might read it that way. I understand why Patricia herself probably read it that way at first. But it was not. It was just the right thing. I grew up watching my mother manage every week like a puzzle with pieces that did not quite fit, watching her make decisions about what to pay and what to push back, and how to stretch something that was not quite enough to cover what we needed. I watched that for 18 years, and I made myself a promise at 15 that I was not going to be indifferent to that when I saw it in someone else's life. Even if that someone else did not like me. Even if that someone else had been spending 2 years constructing a version of me that had nothing to do with who I actually was. Even then. Because indifference to someone's real struggle because of how they treat you is not strength, it is not principle, it is just pride. And I have worked too hard and come too far to confuse the two. Patricia deserved help, not because she deserved me. She deserved help because she was a person who needed it. Those are two completely different things, and keeping them separate is one of the harder things I have had to learn. I am still learning it. I think I will be learning it for a long time. James asked me once, a few weeks after all of it, whether I regretted not saying anything at the dinner. Not defending myself. Just sitting there with my wine glass while his mother said what she said to a room full of people. I thought about it properly before I answered. I said no, because anything I said in that room would have been about me trying to win something, and I was not there to win anything. I was just there to let the truth be what it was going to be. He said, and the truth was a bank letter. I said, the truth is always a bank letter eventually. Everything else is just noise. He laughed. I laughed too. Oh wait, and we sat together in our kitchen on an ordinary evening, and the mortgage on our own house was being paid on time, and the mortgage on his mother's house was paid in full. And Somewhere across the city, Patricia was probably sitting in a room that was fully hers in a way it had not been for a very long time. And that felt right. Not perfect. Nothing is perfect. But right. And right, real, honest, eyes open right, is more than enough. If you made it to the end of Nadia's story, thank you. Genuinely. This one was quiet and complicated, and I hope it landed somewhere real for you. If any part of it got you, the smile at the dinner table, the spreadsheet on the Tuesday evening, the 9-minute phone call, or that last thought about the difference between strength and pride, drop it in the comments right now and tell me which moment stopped you. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please share it right now. Send it to someone who has ever done the right thing for someone who did not deserve it. Send it to someone who has ever been completely misread by people who never thought to just ask. Send it to someone who needs to hear that the truth does not need your help to arrive. It just needs time. Like this video if you stayed until the very last word, and subscribe, because my next story is going to stop you completely in your tracks. I will see you then.